I will give people a couple of more minutes. Or we can just slowly start and go through the usual IPR stuff and procedure.
Just so you know, if there have been any messages in the last 24 hours, I haven't had time to read them.
That's fine. I think we'll discuss them anyway. It was more of a heads up.
Okay, as I said, just a heads up. Thank you.
That's fine. All right, I will slowly start. Obviously waiting for Pete Resnick to show up because a lot of issues will require his participation, but we can slowly get started. So welcome to the March 2023 email co-interim. I'm Alexei, and Todd is somewhere here. You should all be aware of Note well. If not, please read the relevant documents. I think pretty much everybody here is a long-time IETF participant, so I expect you to know that. As a quick reminder, treat colleagues with respect, dispute ideas using reasoned arguments, use best engineering judgment. This session is being recorded. Who is willing to do the notes, please?
I will if nobody else wants to do it. I just need to figure out how to open the note-taking tool. It's usually an adventure for me.
Okay, thank you very much, Todd. Yeah, again, just main decision points.
Right.
Main arguments. Yeah. Right. Thank you. Quick overview of proposed agenda. Although there are 3 slides, after checking existing list of issues, I think we are closing issues quicker than we are opening them now. So I can see the end of the process. We'll talk about a few things related to trace header fields. They kind of split between our 2 main documents. Then we talk about IANA registration procedure, and where I think the main discussion point is where the text should live. Then there are a couple of remaining SMTP issues we'll discuss briefly. And then we go to the applicability statement, a few more related trace header field related stuff, and just one other issue about use of TLS, which I would like to get progress on. With that, Pete is here. It's all good. Right. Very quickly, this is just a reminder how we ended up with the whole trace header field related set of issues that various documents extended what they thought was defined in our main documents, but they weren't. So with that, let's go to the first issue. After reviewing various open tickets, I ran across issue number 74, syntax for received header fields. I think our last round of discussions resulted that I don't believe we want any syntactic changes. On the slide, this is what 5321.22 bis is currently saying. I suggest to clarify the last sentence by being a bit more explicit. Specifically, that syntax for received header fields is defined in 5321 bis when used by SMTP. Comments? Pete?
Seems a little repetitive, but I got no problem with it.
Well, yeah, I think your text wasn't wrong, but I think it was a bit, not necessarily too obscure, but I think I wanted to be more specific about one issue that probably comes up very often.
Yep,
people want.
I got no problem with it. I mean, it's just extra. No big deal.
Okay.
Makes it clear.
Any other comments? John?
I'm fine with this as long as there's clearly a pointer to from 5322 to 5321 in the more specific syntax. And for those that are coming in through the SMTP path, that pointer is there. And as far as I know, I don't have to do anything with 5321 bis about this.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, I think that should be addressing your concern specifically, that you thought there are conflicts. That makes it quite explicit.
Good.
All right. Dave?
So the cross-referencing from 5322 to 5321 raises a small issue about layer confusion. What happens, for example, if email transport is not done by 5321? You've got the 5322 document depending on a component that isn't actually in play.
Pete?
Let me make sure there I am. Yeah, I may have been a little too subtle in the such as, but 5322 has no normative reference to 5321. The idea here was just giving an example that further restrictions can be applied, such as 5321, and to add Alexi's bit, defining more specific syntax as used by SMTP. But if you could follow that with, but if you wanted to use it somewhere else, you would define more restrictions or less restrictions somewhere else. This was basically the soft, here's an example of how you might further restrict, but it's got to at least follow the syntax, the broad syntax that's in 5322 bis.
Right. All right. Yeah. Hopefully no further comments. If not, then I'll move on to the next one. I will very quickly introduce this, and then Pete talk more about it. One of the issues that John raised was about this optional field at the top of the fields definition, and whether it means that new type of blocks other than trace or recent can be defined, and what does it mean. We have discussed this issue at IETF 111, I believe. There was a very short discussion. I watched a recording. There was no objections at the time to remove this, to keep this field rather. But John raised, I think, a good point about extensibility and whether we really want to encourage creation of new type of header field blocks, and what exactly the semantic is, what does it mean. So in reviewing this, Pete posted a version 0.5, which actually removed this. And Pete can talk a little bit about why he proposed this change.
Yeah, so it turned out, as I went through it, that trace itself was already extensible. We cleared that up a bit, which meant that to get something into the trace block didn't require any additional syntax up here in the top level. After talking with John, I don't know why I didn't get this before, but he clarified. We don't see any particular reason at this point that the recent block would need to be extensible. We don't see any particular reason, and this might be the controversial bit, that a new block needed to be added that wouldn't require some new specification to do so anyway, because how would it behave? And that the obsolete, or whatever we want to call it, syntax, the read only but do not generate syntax, already allows you to chuck crap in here that is otherwise undefined. We sort of came to the conclusion that that additional optional field up at the top really didn't add anything, that anything anybody was generating right now was perfectly legit syntax given everything else, and so we might as well get rid of it. And it only got added in 5322. I think it wasn't in 2822. I think because we didn't think through that, it already appears in the trace, you don't really need it for anything else. So if anybody's got concerns, do speak up. But this seemed like we nailed it. He crosses his fingers.
Dave?
The history I remember is that prior to focusing on trace field placement, the header fields were not order dependent. And so in the ABNF presentation that appears to indicate order dependency, that wasn't actually intended. That could probably be fixed by doing a level of indirection, which then makes the order occurrence not matter. I'm also a little confused about what problem this is fixing, and more importantly, whether this problem has manifested itself in the last 40 years.
So the more interesting question was, what problem was it fixing when we introduced it into 5322 that wasn't there in 2822? And I think the problem that was trying to fix was additional stuff in the trace block, which is more cleanly fixed with the extension in the trace syntax itself. So I think we were rash in adding it here in 5322, and taking it back out is the proper solution.
That sounds as if the statement is all optional fields or trace fields.
No. There's an well, this doesn't go down far enough in the syntax. There
is
an
another optional at the bottom as
at
well.
the bottom, and so this was introduced to
Oh,
specifically put an additional optional field within the trace block, which I think we've all decided was dumb.
Or between trace block and resend block, and then we were
Or
trying to
between
figure
the
out
trace block and resent header.
what it meant. Yeah.
oh,
Yes, your look of confusion is exactly
Right.
what we all went through.
the facial expression is in fact my comment. I'm done.
Right. Thank you. So yes, I believe this is correcting a mistake. We squarely pointed the gun at our foot and pulled the trigger.
Yes, and the reason why I specifically wanted to bring this up, because we made the opposite decision a few years back, and the issue was reopened. Even though we didn't have a ticket for it, we didn't track it properly, so now we are doing it kind of correctly, just to make sure that it's all minuted and recorded. All right, so assuming, I already posted a message, you and I posted messages to the mailing list saying that please object if you have a good reasons. Unless there are any objections, what is in current version of 5 is going to stay, basically without the top optional field. Right. Thank you very much. And now coming up to our somewhat favorite bike shed at the moment is basically at last IETF 115, I think we had agreement that we want to annotate, to add an extra field to the message header field names registry, pointing out whether a particular header field is a trace or not. And now we need to decide where this extra IANA registration procedure is going to live. John, go ahead.
Let's see. First of all, I am persuaded by your comment at the bottom of this slide that that 5322 BIS is probably a better place than 5321 BIS. But I would encourage the working group to put things which are fundamental like this in the base documents. So if we're defining trace fields and extension trace fields in 5322 BIS, then instructions about how they should be registered ought to be there rather than trying to add them onto the AS and hope somebody will see them.
Okay, Pete.
And I sent the message late last night just to kind of summarize, maybe more for me than for everybody else, where I am on this. And I am not dying on this hill, but it seems to me that adding whether something is trace and the whole discussion of what that means and the semantics of that to 5322 BIS is adding newish stuff to something that's supposed to be going to internet standard. I am not committed in any way for it to be in the AS in particular, but a whole new discussion of what would constitute a new trace field, why you would do that, what its operational semantics are, seems a bit much for 5322 BIS. So I'm leaning toward either the AS or a different document. I'd like to understand why we think the AS is not appropriate, although I've got some inklings, but I've got at least funny stomach feelings about putting it in 5322 bis.
Alexi.
Sorry, I was muted. I was saying, Dave, you go ahead first, and then John can respond to Pete.
So the more generic comment first. My general view is an applicability statement should talk about application. It should not go and be a spec for core technology. It might have normative language about use of the technology. It may in fact be innovative in that. That's an interesting discussion to have about the document, but it shouldn't go and be defining the technology. That's what specs are for. And as soon as you've got normative language that goes, for example, and defines what a trace header field is, or defines a registry for them, I think you've moved into being a specification rather than an AS. That's the general comment. The specific one is the degree of energy and discussion and time that has been spent on trace header fields arguably already moves this document into an area of new content far beyond what was in the previous version of this document. And so I suspect what's going on right now would be haggling about price, to use the cliched reference. And if essentially, from what I can tell, what's happened in the crystallizing of the trace discussion is the sense of a semantic concept that was vague at best in the earlier documents and is trying to be made much more concrete operationally and syntactically. If that's true, and I think it is, and it's already in the document, and I think it is, then the issue of modifying a registry or defining a new one is small potatoes in comparison. The question then, I'm just going to move on to the next point. The question then would be, what's the right way to signal that something is a trace field? If trace fields have fundamentally different syntax, and I think they don't, then having a new registry might make sense. If they are in fact only a matter of where they appear in the header and how they're handled in the header, and I think that's the definition people have landed on, then having it be a flag in the existing registry for header fields seems the simplest solution, assuming it's operationally okay to go modify an existing registry that way.
Okay, John, you're next, then Pete.
Well, first of all, Dave's analysis of the principle about what goes into the AS and what goes into base documents and mine are in complete agreement, and I therefore will not repeat it. Second observation is that I agree with Dave that we've gone off on an excursion here, and it's partly my fault, just try to figure out what exactly a trace field is. And we looped around that a year or two ago, and that resulted in some text in 5321, which I now think we may need to take out, and that's hopefully a discussion for later in the meeting. But if the conclusion is that 5321 should only talk about its trace fields and everything else, and all other discussion and definition at the specification level of trace fields should be in 5322, then this goes in 5322. And Dave's argument that the particular details of where it's flagged in the registry are small potatoes is in that sense exactly right. And if the right solution, as Pete suggested, was to pull all of this stuff out of both documents and put it into something separate, I would lose no sleep over that at all, except that I probably won't volunteer to write it.
Okay, Pete?
Give that second for things to kick in. So Dave and John have me convinced it does not belong in the AS. I'm on board with that. I think the thing that's driving me away from 5322, other than the work, and I can make that up by volunteering to write the other bit somewhere else. The only thing that's pushing me against that is I think there's more to it than simply defining a flag in the registry, because I don't think we've written down anywhere what specifically it means to be a trace field. I think it is just a flag in the registry, but there's all sorts of operational implications that people think they have when they call something a trace field. Some of it is remove this when you resend it. Some of it is other operational instruction about how you might, where it belongs when you add it. Does it belong at the top? Does it belong at the bottom?
I did open a ticket for this, and we'll talk about it. Tentatively, it was for AS. I will probably disagree with you as a participant.
Okay.
Are you happy to defer it till late in the session?
Absolutely. But I would say if there's more to it than just defining the registry flag, if you have to go into any kind of detail about what that registry flag means, then it should be in a separate document. If it really is just a flag and 2 sentences to describe it, and everybody agrees that it's just 2 sentences, peachy, I'm happy to put it in 5322.
Right. I would like to complete these 3 documents before the heat death of the universe. So with that in mind, can I propose that maybe we'll try to put some text into 5322 bis, and if people start argue about it, then we'll pull it out and we'll figure out what to do with this. Go on, John.
Yeah, I think the problem here, Alexei, is more or less what Pete said, which is that everything here is connected to everything else, and where one stops is hard. And I think you're quite correct that stopping by saying let's put this flag in the registry and Godot will arrive at some point and bear the rest of the problem. And even to defer it to the rest of this, to later in this meeting, which is fine, is going to get us in trouble. And if that really means we need to write another document, and Pete is willing to take the lead on writing it, I'm willing to help. I have a lot of spare text I'd be happy to donate. But I don't think we can blow the problem off. Which I don't think is what you're suggesting, but still.
No, it's not what I'm suggesting. Maybe completely optimistically, I'm thinking that we're pretty close on this one. But what I'm suggesting is, let's see if I'm right. You already wrote the text. What I'm suggesting is actually, you have a couple of sentences in your document about IANA registration. I suggest to move this text over to Pete's document and see if it sticks.
That certainly works for me.
Okay, and obviously we'll have a later discussion about in this session about operational considerations. If something new comes up, we might revisit this decision, but I'm trying to make some decisions so that we can, tentatively move forward and see if it works. Right. With that, let's move on. So trying to wrap up a couple of issues raised by John. One issue is about Appendix B, which is generating SMTP commands from internet message format header fields, and whether it needs updating in regards to submission, whether it's correct as written. I appreciate that people might not remember exact text, and it is too much text to put on a single slide. So proposal on the table is, I think the current text is correct and no further changes are needed. But can we please have a couple of volunteers? John, if you want to say something extra, of course, please.
My only comment was that this was raised on the mailing list a very long time ago, as these things go, and it's gotten no substantive comment, which is what has led me to conclude that there wasn't strong working group consensus for dealing around with this anymore.
Yeah, and I think you've done a minor tweak that might have clarified possible terminology confusion. Everything remaining seems to be correct as written.
No, again, I felt obligated to raise this so that there was no confusion about my having made decisions by myself in a closet. But I think we're done.
Can I have some volunteers to double check the text, other than chairs and editors?
That overwhelming enthusiasm seems like more reinforcements are just being done. Again, people have had months and months to look at this.
There were volunteers in the chat room.
Oh,
okay. Sorry. Okay, excellent. John and Ken, excellent. Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay. And another thing, another ticket that John opened was about operational requirements. I used John text and I added section titles so that it's more readable. So basically there is a discussion in section 7.8, local operational requirements and resistance to attacks, and 7.9, scope of operations of SMTP servers. And there are pointers to both of them from section 6.2. Again, I had a quick look at this. I think the text is fine as is. But I would like to hear what people think. And again, if there are any volunteers to double check this. So the proposal is, if the assumption then the text is okay as is, no future text in applicability statement is needed. But obviously, if people double check and find that that's not true, that can be proposed. Thank you, John. Ken, can you also have a look at this one?
Sure.
Thank you. All right. So I will send a message asking for a specific deadline to double check these two issues, and assuming that everybody is happy and no further changes are needed, I will close them in a couple of weeks. Right. Moving on now to a couple of issues in AS related to the trace header fields. There were two sets of proposed additions to the applicability statement. One is based on my text, which John extended and made more helpful, I believe. It's about basically you can only trust received header fields that you inserted, and be careful about what kind of trust you place in all other header fields inserted by the agents, as well as what kind of conclusions you can derive from them. What people think about this text? John.
Let's see. There I am. I think it's okay. I mean, in practice, I actually find received headers useful for like sorting mail to figure out where it came from. But I guess that would be covered by this. So I think it's okay. I think this is one of those things where it discourages people from naively trusting, and people who actually know what's going on will understand what it means. So it's okay.
Sounds good.
So it might be both simpler and safer to cast this in terms of what the received fields are and are not, and what they are expected to be useful for, rather than beginning by, or really frankly dealing with who they're not useful for.
Are you offering to suggest a counter proposal then?
I'm willing to take this text and try to recast it in those terms. Yeah.
Okay. And that, so
So to spare me from going up to GitHub, if you could just send me that text.
fine. So, okay, what we'll do is you propose alternative text, and then we'll pick between the two, or maybe we'll pick bits of it or whatever. Okay. Sounds like a plan. Any other comments? All right, moving on. The other suggestion was specifically that motivated me as one of MUA writers about what are the trace header fields are useful for, or what you should or shouldn't do with them. So specific suggestion is, if message is being resent, a lot of email clients have edit as new message when they basically take existing message as a template and strip it and sanitize it. And specific suggestion is, if you do this kind of operation, you should strip the trace header fields. Comments? Todd?
I'm not clear here. Is this in relation still to issue 84 or 85?
'84. Why?
Okay. Well, the last
there are two separate issues.
84, so that's why I was confused.
Yeah, this is issue 84.
Great. Sorry. Thank you.
John?
I don't disagree, but I mean, there's a whole lot more stuff you want to strip. I mean, look at the header of any random message, and you're going to find stuff put in by spam filters and mysterious crud put in by bulk mailers and stuff. So
I think a lot of it will be registered as trace, basically.
yeah, I guess. I mean, I think this is one of those things. Like, it's not wrong, but but if you're going to say that, I would say it more strongly. They should only include headers likely to be relevant to the newly edited message or something like that. In addition to stripping trace headers. I mean, for example, date. You probably don't want to keep that.
Yes, well, date is not trace, so it's specifically talking about trace.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That there's stuff beyond trace headers that you would strip.
I suppose we don't really have a document saying, how to implement editors new. If we had such a document, that extra text will go there, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it seems, like I said, like, it's not wrong, but it seems like, that
You're saying it's insufficient.
A naive user might say, oh, then I'll keep everything else, which would be wrong. Well, let me see what Dave has to say.
Dave? Wait, Dave, we couldn't hear you. Try again.
Right. So I think my comment is at least in the ballpark of what you two have just been talking about. To the extent we make comments about what should be done for a reply, it's a technical statement about formulating a new message based on an old one. And we have, to the extent we also have comments about forwarding, which is including a message in in a new message, then this is in the realm of another one, which is basing a new message on an old message. And in that sense, it's almost like reply, but of course the target recipients are different, and there's expected to be some added content, but then there is for that for reply also. As such, this isn't specific to trace. This is specific to creating a new kind of message based on an old message. And that is either a big topic or a small one, depending on where it's put in the document, how much needs to be said. Again, as was said, it's not as if this text is wrong. It's that it's touching a more general topic rather than one that's specific to trace header fields. And it may or may not say more than about just trace header fields. But this then goes back to the question of whether this document is now doing more than just moving from draft to proposed.
This is specifically about applicability statement, which is a new document. John?
Some of this discussion, excuse me, is beginning to feel like we should be attaching new text to the document about called Principles for Writing Mail User Agents for Fun and Profit, which is a document we have deliberately avoided trying to write for the last company years, for lots of good reasons, which Dave has explained in the past much better than I can. But it seems to me that what we could do about this would be to turn this around a little bit. And I'm not prepared to propose text in real time, but will. But make this say more like an MUA which uses an existing email message this way, should be very careful to clear out header fields that are relevant to the previous message and how it was received, rather than and then use trace as an example, rather than making this a specific sounding statement about trace fields. And I think that dodges the bullet that Dave and John Rubine have been talking about without losing this probably useful comment entirely. You're muted. You're either muted or not speaking, Alexei.
I'll chase you about the text.
Okay.
And Pete wanted to say and then decided not to. Pete, do you still want to talk?
Pete decided that John said it better, and Dave's comment completed the picture. So.
Okay. All right. Moving on. Is Pete's favorite topic that he wanted to bring up earlier. And I will participate in this discussion as an individual. Go on, Pete.
So this
Actually,
may be...
hold
Yeah,
on.
go
Todd might have a quick clarifying question.
I just have a question. The agenda that was posted to the list mentions ticket 85 here, and there's no mention of ticket 86. Oh,
I updated slides and I forgot to update the agenda.
okay.
But they are kind of all
No
related.
worries.
Yeah.
No worries.
Thank you for calling me out. Pete.
So this may be overtaken by events of the past, 45 minutes. Because this really does go to what needs to be written about trace and where, sufficient for defining what that registry field means, right? That's really the standing question, is what is implied by ticking that column in the registry? But maybe
Okay.
we've come up with the answer that it doesn't imply that much, and therefore it's okay to just have a tick mark and we're done. And there's only going to be a few sentences.
Yeah, that's basically my position, that other than talking about what MUAs can do, all other agents just add trace header fields. For some specific ones, there are requirements to strip them at various points, like authentication results on inbound into the target system. But I don't think we'll have rules that applies to all trace header fields. So I think we shouldn't try. John?
And per your earlier comment, Alexei, there's already text in 5321 bis that answers a small portion of this question from back when we were trying to do more about defining what a trace field was there. And I think per your earlier suggestion, if we could take that text, tweak it a little bit, and drop it into 5322, we will be about 90% through on this. I think we could fairly much ignore the other 10%. If Pete is going to collaborate with me on that moving process, I'm happy to do that.
Makes me very happy. Well, I mean, realistically, the whole trace-related discussion is the main remaining sticking point that we have in all our documents.
Yeah, and coming back to Pete's question earlier, we need to address these kinds of issues, but we either need to address them minimally or we need to go down the path of another document.
I think we've got now violent agreement on that bit. I guess my question is, and I'll work with John on some text here, but I would like to hear from some others. I mean, what do we think that means? If it only means it's informational stuff that is put into the message as it traverses different systems.
Lost your sound, Pete.
Hold on. Pete, try again. Try to Well, John, you and I are still here. Oh, can you hear us? Pete, can you still hear us?
Let's see. I heard
Oh,
you.
yes.
Can you now?
Yes.
Okay, mystery. But I heard you the entire time. My only comment was, so long as what we're defining is a trace field is just something that is information as the message traverses different systems that is stuck up at the top for informational purposes. And that's all that tick box means, and it has no other operational implications. Glad to put that in. I'm not sure what the column in the registry buys us at that point. But okay. I still think there's going to have to be text written about what you do with the fact that it's trace,
Well, as I said,
because people, I think, have expectations.
for
Yeah,
NUIs, we were discussing some text about this. I know it's not much, but it's basically strip it under certain conditions.
I agree, Pete, and my personal preference would be to push this harder, but I think we just agreed that takes us off in the new document range. But I think it is just informational. I think we need to make that clear, and I think that's okay. And we've now got tentative text, which I will try to fix for the AS, which talks about what you do with them operationally, and text has been proposed at least on the list, which we could drop into the AS as well, because it's just descriptive about this being intended for people trying to understand what happened or analyzing problems, and not for clever interpretation by delivery systems, for example. And I think we could elaborate on that a little bit in the AS without going into the territory, which I think I would consider would fall into the range that they've described the specification rather than description earlier. So I think we're close on the same page. In a more perfect world, I would hold hands with you and dash off and write that other document, but I don't think we're in that world.
No one wants to see that.
I'd be convinced.
So yeah, I'm okay with minimalist text in 5322 bis that just says it's part of that. And actually, I don't think, there's much that needs to be added to 5322 bis at the moment. There's already a little bit of text in there, maybe a sentence or two more, and then put that in the registry and be done with it. And so I'm not hearing anyone jump up and say, no, more is going to need to be said, and that needs to be in, and we need to start writing that new document immediately.
Agreed. I think the one thing which we should probably be sure is in the AS, but then we get through with this, I think it's there now, is that the reason for distinguishing, and we've had this part of this discussion, is the reason for distinguishing trace fields from all these other things is because of that topness property. And at the same time, dear reader of AS, if you think the topness property has been violated and you throw the message away on that basis, you're likely to lose some good messages. And,
Yep. Okay. Consider me convinced.
All right, and with that, trying to wrap up ticket that was originally on 5321 bis and then was moved to ES is relationship to basically use of TLS with SMTP and submission. I think I would like to have some volunteers to double check this. I think text that was part written, part shepherded by Todd about hop by hop authentication and encryption addressed a lot of these, but there might be some loose ends specifically to TLS, in particular, like no protection in storage. And in regards to 8314, I'm not sure what needs to be said in this case. John, do you have any specific suggestions or requests?
No, I just indicated in chat that that if you are not disqualifying me because I'm nominally an author on the AS, I'll happily go through the texts there now and take another look. My only big concern is we not go too far in this direction, precisely because we can be in danger of saying things that people understand as if you encrypt things in transit, everything is wonderful. While we've got this very real vulnerability of clear text on the intermediate servers, and we either don't want to go into that space or we want to go into that space very, very carefully, but we don't want to end up with something that says you should encrypt everything in transit because that will solve all your problems.
Right. I think, yeah, if this text is missing, it's absolutely spot on. Basically, TLS, hop by hop TLS is not sufficient to protect. Yeah.
And similar problems would apply to overdoing any comments about Dane or DMARC or anything else that somebody might feel like putting in there. I just think we need to tread very carefully lest we overpromise, I guess would be the easiest, or appear to overpromise. But again, let me read through it carefully and I'll try to make some comments on the mailing list.
Okay, sounds good. And with that, we are at the end of my slides. I feel cautiously optimistic that we're making some progress. I think we didn't quite resolve, we didn't get closure on some specific AS issues, but I think we have some directions and text to start discussing, or maybe the text that needs slight editing. With that, any other issues? John?
Pete made a suggestion in a pre-meeting office discussion about getting specific volunteers to check any or all of this stuff, which seems unresolved. So we've got a clear statement on the mailing list about agreement rather than silence there. If you're satisfied that we've already covered that, that's fine. But I just want to make certain that we've not let that slip.
Yes, well, for a couple of issues specifically, we have volunteers to review the text and say that the text is okay as is, which I think goes along the way that what you and Pete suggested.
Right, but I'm a little bit concerned about any others, as you know very well. I've been very concerned about the degree to which there haven't been comprehensive read-throughs of these documents. I hope they'll occur by working group last call,
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
even careful read-throughs of diffs and change lists on 5321, especially because it is by far the longer document and by far the more convoluted one. The thing I'm particularly concerned about is getting ourselves into a situation in which different sections of that document say things which are not quite consistent with each other. And I've
Right.
tried diligently to check for that, but it needs another set or several more sets of eyes.
Yeah, I think what chairs probably will do is will specifically nudge people to do more detailed reviews. It looks like we are going to have relatively soon a revision of both 5321 base and 5322 base, if at least like shift the text around. And at this point, I think we'll be, if not at the point where we can do last call, I will be nudging people to do reviews and making sure that.
Good, thanks.
Todd, did you want to say something?
Clarification for the notes. If the participant showing in the list as Duke wishes to be identified by any other name, please speak up now. Okay, Duke it shall be in the notes.
Even if he, she, or it, or they do not, it would be good to know who that is, just for the record.
The person's data tracker profile indicates nothing at all. It appears to be someone who wishes to remain anonymous. Beyond their email address, which John just posted in the list.
All right, I think with that, I think we're done. Thank you very much for coming. And thank you for making progress.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fractious working group, and it's even more fractious authors.